Agile user story. I'm sure you've heard this term over and over again. Some say user stories are just requirements, but in Agile terms, some say it's a problem statement or even how do we come up with the solution. Hi, I'm Rajiv, and in this video, we'll find out what actually is a user story and 4 things that you need to consider when writing one. A user story is not an explanation of feature, but it's an end goal from the user's perspective. Let's take an example of a simple user story. As an application administrator, I want to have the ability to lock other user accounts so I can filter inactive accounts. A good user story basically should answer who, what, and why aspect of a request. In the above example, answer to who is the application administrator, what is the ability to lock other user accounts, and why is to filter inactive user accounts. Now we know what user stories are. Then what are the 4 things to consider when writing a user story? Let's find out. And along the way, we'll also talk about what makes a good user story and what are the techniques that can really help. First, user story is not same as the traditional requirements. Fundamentally, this is a very common misconception and grounded on the misunderstanding on what actually is a user story. A user story doesn't tell how and what to write in a code. Instead, it's a description of the problem that we're trying to solve. These are 2 very different things. A good user story doesn't tell how the problem should be solved. If a user story tells you to design a solution in a certain way, there might be 100 other better ways to do that. Explaining how it should be done would clamp up the innovative ideas that might solve the problem in a better way. It should only tell what the end user is expecting from the system or a feature. Next in the list, user story splitting. A user story is nothing but a useful unit of work. But the secret of doing it right is to work in fast but small steps. The unit of work represented by the user story should be intentionally small. At an absolute max, we should be able to complete a user story within a sprint or an iteration, probably within a week or 2. Imagine we're adding a login feature into our product. The mistake is to include all the functions associated with login and adding it into a single massive login user story. Instead, a much better approach is to imagine a small unit of value perceivable by your users that would start moving in the right direction of having all the required functions. So maybe we could start by simply collecting the email addresses, which would allow us to develop a starting point for a simple registration form. This certainly is a value to a user, but obviously not as much as a proper login function, but it allows us to get the skeleton of our system in place. Next, we can think about problems of solving authorizations, then beefing up with password rules, and eventually setting up a whole login procedure. Moving on, the 4th and last in my list, interdependent user stories. It's inevitable as we go on and add new user stories, they will build on code that we already wrote. It should probably mean a new user story is often easier to write than the old ones if there's an order, because some of the work has already been done. The problem, however, is in trying to manipulate that ordering to optimize the development process. This then stops us focusing on the value that we're delivering, and the danger is we might end up focusing on complex and massive must-haves that add no real value from the user's perspective. Good user stories are atomic. That means we should be able to implement them in any order that we like. The route to value is shorter when we keep our eyes on the real goal, that is, software that does something useful based on what the user stories demand of us. To conclude, user story is a tool to keep the development process focused on what really matters, that is providing the users with software that does something useful. Hope this video will help next time you write a user story. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next episode of Spiralogics SkillUp. While working on this SkillUp video, best part was that I got the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of team members, especially from recording and communications department that we don't often get to work with. Also, I got to explore a lot about agile practices that we often overlook. Lastly, I want to thank everyone that helped me on this video. Sabai? भयो? Okay, thank you. Bhन फेरि अब यसमा नि अब थ्याङ्क यू नै 8 चोटि भन्नु नि क्या हो ल है बिचरा ल ल प्रम्प्टर थाइसी ल तल गइसक्यो मैले एउटै देखेन अब कसले थाहै छैन क्या अब बिसारै गइसक्यो ल धेरै माथि भयो ल ओके ल स्टार्ट टु कन्क्लुड युजर स्टोरी इज अ फेरि उता बोले त्यही गुडिरहेको कि ल ओके ल रहेछ कि यसलाई एकचोटिमा गरौँ अनि त्यसपछि फेरि अर्कोमा जाउँ है बरु धेरै सिनाउँदा हुँदा त मिलाउँदा केही फरक पर्दैन होला नि त ल काउन्ट यति गरौँ क्या भयो है यति गरौँ है एक्सप्लेनिङ हाउ इट सुड ए भयो है मैले त्यही देखेन स्क्रिप्ट देखेन यति यति गरौँ है यहाँदेखि चाहिँ अर्कोमा गरौँ स्क्रिप्टै देखेन मैले अलिक माथि लग न थाके जस्तो चाहिँ बिचरा गर्दै लामो ए ल भयो है त ल यो त साह्रो लामो भन्ने त यो लास्ट लाइन चाहिँ होला नि एक्सप्लेनिङ गरौँ म भयो रेकर्ड भइरहेको ल के